I was just minutes away from walking down the aisle, lace veil in place, bouquet in hand, my heart pounding with nerves and hope when the knock came. A low, cautious knock, not from the wedding planner, not from my maid of honor. It was one of the security guards. He opened the bridal suite door halfway and leaned in, voice low but urgent. "Miss Miller, we've just detained a young woman at the back service gate. Matches the photo you gave us. It's your sister, Madison." I froze. The air shifted. Every hair on my arm stood up. She was alone, he continued, but she had a large canvas tote bag. Inside, we found a full gallon of red paint, unopened, industrial grade. My stomach dropped. My throat went dry. I could barely breathe. Paint? She came to ruin my wedding. The dress, the flowers, the aisle, all of it. Everything Jacob and I had spent 2 years building. Everything I had sacrificed for, planned for, fought for. She came to destroy it in the last possible moment. And the worst part, I wasn't even surprised. This wasn't the first time Madison tried to sabotage me. It wasn't the first time my own family stood behind her while I stood alone. It was just the most desperate. I stood there for a moment, staring at the guard. The scent of gardenias and hairspray hung thick in the room. My hands shook just slightly as I handed my bouquet to Isabel, my best friend. "What do you want to do, ma'am?" the guard asked, calm but firm. "We can call the sheriff, press charges right now." I could see the images flash across my mind, her in cuffs escorted out in front of everyone. But no, not today, not on my day. "Escort her out." "Permanently," I said, voice cold as stone. "And double-check the guest list. If my parents are anywhere nearby, keep them out too." The guard nodded and left. Silence settled again. Isabel turned toward me, slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lauren, are you okay?" I looked at her, then at myself in the mirror, my veil slightly off-center, my lipstick perfect. But my eyes were tired. I took a deep breath and forced my shoulders back. No more running, no more apologizing. Because what led to this moment, what happened in the weeks before this day, it wasn't just family drama, it was a war. And this wedding, this dress, this arch, this man waiting for me at the end of the aisle, this was my victory. 2 months earlier, everything felt perfect. Jacob and I were standing under strings of golden lights at the Willoughby Garden Hall in downtown Maple Falls. The room smelled of eucalyptus and citrus, and the soft clinking of wine glasses filled the air. Our engagement party was in full swing, elegant but simple, just like we wanted. I remember turning to look at him, and he gave me that familiar, steady smile. The one that always made me feel like the world could fall apart. And we'd still be standing. I had never felt more seen, more safe. Jacob Reed wasn't just the man I loved. He was the calm in every storm I had lived through. We met 5 years ago when he joined the architecture firm where I worked in interior design. Quiet, brilliant kind. He asked about my ideas instead of talking over them. We clicked fast and we lasted. So tonight, with all the people we loved in one place, it felt like the future was finally catching up to us. That is, until I looked across the room. There they were. My parents, Susan and Greg Miller, sitting stiffly at a table near the front, smiling like they'd practiced it in the car. And next to them, scrolling her phone like she couldn't care less, Madison, my younger sister. Influencer, chronic victim, queen of chaos. She looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. We had never been close, too much resentment, too much history. But tonight was supposed to be a truce, just for a few hours. So I smiled, pretended I didn't notice the way her eyes rolled when people toasted Jacob and me. Jacob's hand slid gently across my back. "Don't worry," he whispered. They're here. That counts for something. I wanted to believe that. And then Susan stood up. She clinked her glass with a spoon. The room quieted like gravity had suddenly shifted. "Can I have everyone's attention, please?" she said, her voice carrying just enough charm to sound polished, but not warm. My stomach dropped. I'd like to start by congratulating my beautiful daughter Lauren and her wonderful fiancé Jacob. We are so proud of them both. Polite applause followed. Glasses lifted. Jacob squeezed my hand. I smiled grateful. But then Susan kept talking. Her tone changed flatter, colder. "And I do have one more thing to announce." She set her glass down. "After a lot of thought and some tough conversations, Greg and I have decided to give the $50,000 wedding fund originally set aside for Lauren to Madison instead." The room froze. I blinked. I actually laughed, soft, unsure, waiting for the punchline. But there was none. The laughter died in my throat. I looked around, waiting for anyone to join in, to laugh with me, to say it was a joke. But no one did. Faces shifted, eyes dropped. Jacob's hand tightened around mine. "That's funny, Mom," I said, forcing a shaky laugh. "But you're kidding, right? That money's mine. You gave it to me years ago." Susan's smile vanished, like a mask slipping off. She lifted her chin. "I'm not joking, Lauren," she said, her voice razor sharp. "Madison's getting married later this year, and she needs it more than you do." My heart slammed against my ribs. "You can't be serious," I whispered, but she was. My dad sat stone-faced next to her, arms crossed. Not one word. Not 1 ounce of support. I stood slowly, my chair sliding back. Behind me, that money has been in my name since I was 19. It's a custodial account. You both said it was mine to use however I wanted. Susan shrugged like the law was a mere suggestion. "You and Jacob both have good jobs. Madison and Ryan are struggling. They deserve a beautiful wedding too." I felt like I couldn't breathe. Anger surged, but beneath it, shock. Deep, piercing shock. "We've already put deposits down," I said. "We budgeted carefully. We even planned to use part of that money as a down payment on our first home." Madison slammed her chair back and stood up. "Oh my God, stop being so selfish, Lauren," she shouted. "You could have offered to share it months ago. You know we need it more than you." My jaw tightened. I turned to her slowly. "This isn't about needs, Madison. It's about respect. I planned. I saved. You blew your entire fund on a fake business, and now you're demanding mine." Susan's voice snapped like a whip. "She lives simply. She doesn't have much. Her fiancé is doing his best. You've always had more, Lauren." I folded my arms across my chest, and I worked for it. I followed the rules. I played smart. And now I'm being punished for that. Silence. Susan's face turned red. Her eyes burned with something I hadn't seen in years. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and slapped me hard. The crack echoed through the room like a gunshot. My head jerked to the side. My cheek stung, instant heat spreading across my face. But it wasn't the pain that got me, it was the betrayal. The gasp from the crowd was sharp and collective. Someone dropped a glass. I stood there frozen, eyes welling up not from tears but fury. I turned back to face her, my voice steady cold. "You don't get to hit me because I said no." At the edge of the room, I heard a voice near the bar. "Hello, I need to report an assault at Willoughby Garden Hall. Just now." Within minutes, sirens. The party was dead silent. No one moved. 2 officers entered the venue. One walked up to me. "Are you the one who was struck?" I nodded once. The waiter stepped forward and explained everything. Full view, dozens of witnesses. Susan tried to play it off. "She's my daughter. This is just family business." but the officer was calm. "Ma'am, assault is assault." Then he turned to me. "Would you like to press charges?" My heart thundered, but my voice came out clear. Yes, I would. 3 weeks after the slap that shattered my engagement party, after the arrest, the silence, the fallout, I thought maybe things had finally quieted down. I was wrong. It was a Thursday morning, cloudy, quiet. I came home from work, tossed my bag on the counter, and opened the mailbox. Inside was a large envelope, thick, formal, ominous. Return address, Holt and Farrow, attorneys at law. I remember feeling it before I even opened it. That twist in my stomach, that sense that something terrible was waiting inside. I ripped it open. Inside was a formal notice. My parents were suing me, not metaphorically, legally. Greg and Susan Miller. My parents were filing a civil suit to regain control of the $50,000 account. Their claim that the money had been earmarked exclusively for educational purposes and that I had abused its intended use. I stared at the papers, my hands trembling. I couldn't breathe. Jacob found me sitting on the floor of our apartment, surrounded by court documents, just staring. "They're really doing this," I whispered. "They're trying to take it back. All of it." He knelt beside me, calm as ever. "We'll fight," he said simply. And we did. I hired Claire Benton, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for being unshakable in court. She was tall, collected, and spoke like someone who'd seen far worse than helicopter parents with a God complex. After reviewing everything, bank documents, account history, the arrest report, she looked at me across her desk and said, "They don't have a case. The account transferred to your name when you turned 19. There are no restrictions. Any verbal promises won't hold up in court." I nodded, relieved but not at peace. "Then why go through all of this?" I asked. She didn't even pause. "Because people like your parents, they'd rather burn everything to the ground than admit they favored the wrong child." That sentence hit me like a freight train. It was never about the money. It was about the image, the control, covering Madison's failures by erasing my stability. The court dates started stacking up. There were depositions, discovery, emails. Every time I entered that courtroom and saw them, Greg and Susan sitting next to Madison, stone-faced, refusing to look at me, it felt like another cut. They weren't just trying to reclaim money. They were trying to rewrite history. During one tense hearing, Madison took the stand. She looked straight at the judge and said, "The money was only ever meant for college." Lauren knew that. Claire stood up slowly. "Did you use your fund strictly for college expenses?" "Ms. Miller," Madison hesitated. "Well, not all of it," she muttered. Claire didn't blink. "In fact, you dropped out after 2 years. Then spent the rest launching a failed yoga brand, didn't you?" The room shifted. The judge leaned forward slightly. "That's not relevant," Madison said, her voice rising. Claire stepped closer. "Actually, it's very relevant. Because if the funds were restricted, why weren't you held to that standard?" Silence. Madison blinked, jaw clenched. No answer. I sat in that courtroom, not as a daughter, but as a defendant in a war I never started. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a lawsuit. It was the final attempt to break me. And I wasn't going to let them win. Just when I thought the courtroom was the battlefield, a new war front opened, one I never saw coming. It started with a phone call from my cousin Rachel. "Hey, Lauren," she said, her voice slow, careful. "I just wanted to say I'm so sorry about you and Jacob." My heart stopped. "What about us?" I asked, frowning. "You guys broke up, right?" "No," I said sharply. "Who told you that?" A pause. Then, "Your mom called last week. She said Jacob cheated. That you called off the wedding." The room spun. "No, that's not true. None of that is true." Within the next hour, I got 3 more calls. Old family friends, distant relatives, even a college roommate, all confused, all asking why the wedding had been canceled. Some even forwarded me emails, fake emails allegedly sent from me. Same name, same tone, but the sender address was off. It was a clone. Someone had created a fake account in my name and was emailing people canceling the wedding, blaming Jacob, claiming he was unfaithful. I knew immediately who was behind it. I couldn't prove it. Not yet, but I knew. Madison. It had her fingerprints all over it, twisting facts, destroying people's trust, weaponizing perception. When Jacob came home from a site visit, I told him everything. He didn't even look surprised. She contacted me too, he said, jaw clenched. She sent me pictures. What kind of pictures, I asked already, dreading the answer. He pulled out his phone. There they were, several poorly edited images. Photoshopped garbage, my face clumsily pasted onto someone else's body, standing beside a man I'd never seen. In some random bar, some fake night out. It was laughable, except it wasn't, because my parents saw them too. Madison had sent them the same fake pictures. She was planting the idea, the seed of betrayal, trying to poison the only thing I had left, Jacob's trust. He looked me in the eyes. I didn't believe any of it. Not for 1 second. And still my stomach ached. My hands shook. It wasn't just about what they were doing, it was what it meant. They were willing to destroy my character just to gain leverage. I called my Aunt Margot, Susan's sister, one of the few family members who hadn't taken sides. She answered on the second ring. "I've been meaning to call you," she said with a heavy sigh. "Why is this happening?" I asked, voice cracking. She paused. "Because your mom is protecting Madison," she said gently. "She's always protected her, even when she didn't deserve it. She's trying to make you look unstable, so no one questions where the money went." It hit me like ice in my veins. It wasn't just a slap or a lawsuit. This was a smear campaign, a full-blown calculated effort to ruin everything I'd built, to erase my credibility, to dismantle my future, just so Madison could walk away clean. I leaned against the kitchen counter, cold rage settling into my chest. They weren't just trying to break me anymore. They wanted to make sure no one believed me if I fought back. But I wasn't going to break, and I damn sure wasn't going to disappear. It came late, almost midnight. I was lying in bed next to Jacob, wide awake, scrolling through another round of damage control, replying to guests, correcting rumors, screenshotting evidence when my phone buzzed. No contact name, just a number I hadn't seen in years, and a message. "They did this to me." Again. My heart skipped. I stared at it for a long moment, almost too scared to hope it meant what I thought. Then another message came. "This is Alex. If you still have this number, I'm sorry I left you alone with them." Alex, my brother, older by 4 years, vanished from my life. 6 years ago, after one brutal Thanksgiving dinner, one no one ever talked about again. We hadn't spoken since. No calls, no texts, just gone. I sat upright, my breath caught in my chest. I typed back, "What do you mean they did this to you too?" The typing bubble appeared almost instantly. Same thing, different flavor. When I was 17, Mom guilted me into transferring my entire college fund to Madison. Said I didn't need it because I got a scholarship. Said it was my duty as a big brother. I blinked. Wait, what? I never knew that. "Yeah, you weren't supposed to." I confronted her after she raided my savings for Madison's creative camp in New York. It was never refunded. I told Dad I was done with the whole family. Packed up, left, never looked back. My fingers hovered over the screen. They never told me. They made it sound like you cut us off. That was the plan. Mom controls the narrative. Madison just runs behind her like a shadow. I felt like I couldn't breathe. All those years. All that silence. And this was the missing piece. I hadn't just been the target. I was just the next one. They'd done it before. They knew how. They manipulated, guilted, and weaponized family ties to funnel every resource, every chance into Madison's hands. And when anyone said no, they were erased, just like Alex. I stared into the dark for a long time after that. Jacob sleeping beside me. One thought kept circling in my mind like static. I couldn't turn off. How many times had I let them rewrite the truth? How much of my childhood had been choreographed, curated, bent into shapes that only made sense for Madison? I had thought I was standing alone in this mess, but I wasn't, and somehow knowing that made me stronger. Alex's final message that night was short. "Finish this, Lauren. Don't let them keep winning." I screenshotted it, saved it. Proof not just of the pattern, but of the legacy they thought they could hide. It was Claire who found it, buried deep in a set of documents my parents had filed years ago. Tax records, account transfers, legal letters they assumed I'd never see. We were prepping for the final court appearance. Claire was thorough, obsessively so. "This is interesting," she murmured, eyes narrowing, as she scanned a scanned PDF labeled Miss C. Financial documents 2010-20. What I asked, leaning over her desk. She slid the paper across to me. It was a contract, signed by both Greg and Susan Miller, and forged with my name at the bottom. A financial agreement declaring that the $50,000 account was intended strictly for educational use and that any other purpose would require parental consent. Dated when I was 17, still legally a minor, still under their control. Except I never saw that paper, never signed it. Claire looked up at me, slowly. "This is fraud, flat out. If they present this in court, I'll object. But if we wanted to, we could go further." I blinked. "You're saying they forged my name?" She nodded. "And that makes this document null. More than that, it gives us leverage. We could file a counterclaim for fraud, document falsification, even identity misrepresentation." I stared at that signature, an awkward imitation of my handwriting, close but not quite right. "I don't want revenge," I whispered. Claire raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" I nodded. "I don't need them punished. I just need them gone." She leaned back thoughtful. "Well, this gives us an exit ramp. We show them we could destroy them legally, but we won't as long as they walk away quietly. No more claims, no more threats, no more fake emails or lawsuits. Total surrender or we go nuclear." It was the first time in months I felt like I was holding the pen again. For so long, they had twisted the story, made me the villain, the obstacle, the ungrateful daughter. But now I had proof, not just of their lies, of their pattern. They didn't just take, they rewrote, redefined, reshaped. Claire drafted a notice of discovery inclusion, a quiet way of letting the opposing counsel know we had the forged document in hand. 3 days later, the calls stopped. The court date was pushed, and then dismissed. No explanation. No apology, just silence. But this time it wasn't weaponized. It wasn't a punishment. It was retreat. And even though I knew I'd never get the justice I wanted, what I had was better. Control. And the absolute certainty that they would never touch my future again. The sky was clear that morning. Sunlight spilled over the hills outside Maple Falls, kissing the garden venue Jacob and I had chosen months earlier. Everything was in place. Rows of white chairs, a wooden arch wrapped in soft peonies, and eucalyptus string lights strung between trees. Simple, elegant, us. In the bridal suite, I stood in front of a tall mirror veil, draped over my shoulders, dress perfectly fitted. For a moment, I let myself breathe. Not deeply, but enough to believe we'd made it. Jacob was waiting at the altar. Our guests were arriving. Every single detail had been triple-checked. And we'd done more than prepare flowers and seating charts. We'd hired security. 2 professional guards stationed at both entrances with clear instructions. No Madison, no Susan, no Greg. We weren't taking any chances. Then a soft knock at the door. One of the guards stepped in. "Miss Miller," he said, low and careful. "We've just detained a woman trying to enter through the back gate. She matches the photo you provided." My throat tightened. Was she alone? Yes, but she had a large tote bag. When we searched it, we found a gallon-sized can of red paint. Time stopped. She had brought it. She was actually going to do it. Ruin the dress, ruin the aisle, ruin the moment. Everything Jacob and I had rebuilt from ashes. She came to torch it all. The guard watched me waiting. "We can call the sheriff. Press charges again. It's your call." I looked down at my bouquet. White roses, ivory ribbon. My fingers didn't tremble this time. "No," he raised an eyebrow. "Just escort her off the property. Make sure she doesn't come back. And check the perimeter for my parents. If they're here, same treatment." He nodded and disappeared. I stood there surrounded by silence, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not because everything was perfect, because I was done being afraid. Isabel came in, eyes wide. "What happened?" I didn't flinch. Madison tried to sneak in with a can of paint. Her jaw dropped. She what? She wanted to destroy everything. I looked up, met her eyes, but she didn't. Isabel blinked, then slowly smiled. "Then you already won." My uncle, my dad's brother, was waiting outside to walk me down the aisle. He offered his arm. "You ready?" I nodded. The doors opened, and the moment I stepped into the garden, everything else disappeared. The betrayals, the legal battles, the tears, the silence, all of it faded into the background, because Jacob was there, standing beneath that arch, eyes locked on mine, like nothing in the world could touch us. We exchanged vows beneath a clear sky. We promised to protect each other, not just in love, but in dignity. And when the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," the applause wasn't just joy, it was relief. It was proof that we had made it through the storm, through the noise, through everything they threw our way. The reception was pure magic. Soft music, clinking glasses, laughter that didn't feel forced. Every speech, every toast, blonde. Unearned. No drama, no sabotage, just people who loved us, really loved us. And late into the night, when the music slowed and the last dance played, I looked around and realized they failed. They couldn't break me, couldn't shake Jacob, couldn't poison this moment. And I walked away from my own wedding, not just as a wife, but as someone who finally knew what it meant to be free. After the wedding, Jacob and I disappeared for 3 weeks. No phones, no emails, just the ocean. We rented a tiny beach house on the Oregon coast, woke up to gulls cooked barefoot, danced in the kitchen to 90s playlists. For the first time in what felt like a year, my body forgot how to brace for impact. There were no subpoenas, no whispers, no sudden calls from blocked numbers, just silence. And this time I welcomed it. When we got home, we moved into our new place, a modest 2-bedroom condo just outside the city. Nothing extravagant, but it was ours. We used what was left of the $50,000 for a down payment. We painted the walls ourselves, burnt clay in the living room, sage green in the kitchen. Framed photos from the wedding lined the hallway. It wasn't just a home. It was the evidence that we had survived, that we had won. Jacob spent weekends assembling furniture with the kind of focus only he had. I designed each corner slowly, like planting something meant to last. One Saturday, while building a bookshelf for the guest room, Jacob asked, "Who do you think will be our first overnight visitor?" I smiled. Madison. For a moment, I imagined what it might feel like if things were different. If Susan called voice, soft and regretful. If Greg admitted he'd been silent for too long. If Madison grew up, but the image vanished as quickly as it came. "Someone who actually cares," I answered, brushing dust off the shelf. And I meant it. We celebrated our first Thanksgiving, just the two of us. Made too much food, laughed through burnt rolls and spilled gravy. No calls came, no apologies. My birthday passed. No card, no message. And you know what? It hurt less than I thought it would. Because every time I missed them, I remembered the slap, the lawsuit, the lies, the forged contract, the paint, the photos. All the ways they tried to make me smaller, forgettable, replaceable. And I stopped waiting. One afternoon, while grocery shopping, I ran into Rachel again. She hugged me tight, then pulled back and said, "Did you hear Madison's wedding is back on?" I raised an eyebrow. "Nope, we don't exactly exchange updates these days." She sighed. "Your parents took out a loan. It's gonna be huge. Ballroom at the Grand Marquette downtown. They're flying in a chef from LA. It's a lot." I let out a dry laugh. "Of course it is. You going if they invite you?" she asked gently. I looked her in the eye. She tried to ruin my wedding with a can of paint. Rachel blinked. "Right," she said quietly. "I guess that answers that." The invitation never came, and maybe that was their final move, to pretend I no longer existed. But the funny thing is, I didn't need to exist in their story anymore, because I was writing my own. And their pages, they were fading. A few months later, I heard from my Aunt Margot. Apparently, several family members declined Madison's wedding invitation. Some were polite, others were blunt. No interest in supporting people who torched their own daughter, one uncle reportedly said. The shine was wearing off. Even the people who used to nod quietly were starting to whisper. And while I didn't rejoice in their embarrassment, I felt something else, relief, not because they lost, but because I no longer cared if they won. And in that space between what I used to crave and what I chose instead, I found peace. There's a strange kind of silence that comes after a storm you thought might never end. Not the silence of absence, but of clarity. It creeps in slowly. One morning you realize your jaw isn't clenched. You laugh without checking who's in the room. You don't flinch when your phone rings. That silence is what freedom sounds like. I used to think family was everything. That blood outranked truth. That love meant swallowing pain, forgiving endlessly, staying small, so others could feel big. But I was wrong. Family, real family, isn't who shares your last name. It's who shows up when things fall apart. It's who protects your peace even when it's inconvenient. And love without respect is control. Love without honesty is manipulation. Love without boundaries is just a prettier word for obedience. I spent years thinking if I just worked harder, played nicer, said less, they'd treat me differently. But it was never about what I did. It was about what I represented: accountability, self-worth, a mirror they didn't want to look into. And so they broke the mirror over and over until I stopped letting them hold it. When I stood up for myself, pressed charges, fought back in court, protected my name, shielded my wedding, I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't being cruel. I was claiming something no one ever taught me. I had a right to dignity. The money helped. Of course it did. We bought our home, built our life, started our future. But what that $50,000 really gave me wasn't financial. It was symbolic, because they tried to take it from me, not just to help Madison, but to erase me. And I refused. I stood my ground, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. And in doing that, I learned the most important lesson of all. No one is entitled to access your peace. Not even your mother, not your sister, not the people who raised you. You get to choose who sits at your table, who shares your wins, who earns your trust. You get to rewrite the definition of family if the one you were born into refuses to grow. Today, I look around and see a life that I built. A husband who never wavered, friends who showed up, a brother who returned from the shadows to remind me I wasn't alone. And most importantly, I still have me, wiser, stronger, whole. Because the moment I stopped trying to prove my worth to people who refused to see it was the moment I became free. 1 year later, the noise is gone. No lawsuits, no threats, no fake emails in the middle of the night. Just the quiet rhythm of a life Jacob and I built from the ground up. We opened a small design studio together, Reed and Miller Interiors. It's not flashy, but it's ours. Every project we take on every couple we help, it feels like we're giving other people the fresh start we had to fight for. Sometimes Jacob asks me, "Do you think they'll ever reach out, your parents?" I always give him the same answer, maybe. But if they do, it'll take more than an apology. It'll take change. And I'm not holding my breath because I'm not waiting anymore. I'm living with love that lifts me, work that fulfills me, and a peace that no one gave me. I claimed it for myself. I didn't just survive their betrayal. I turned it into a beginning.